In this video, we're going to be talking about game reviews in general, video game reviews more specifically. There's obviously been a lot of discussion revolving The Last of Us 2 and its polarizing reviews. You're seeing the game industry has almost unanimously given this game 10s across the board, while the user scores are markedly less, going by places like Metacritic, for example. So in this video, I just kind of want to address that, what my thoughts are about reviews, and kind of give you guys some interesting information about reviews in the gaming industry. First of all, I just want to talk about why we called this review an honest review. That's not something we've ever put in a review we've done before. It is not an implication that other places are not doing honest reviews. The reason we put honest review for this review is because we were asked to do an honest review. I don't know how many times I was asked to do an honest review. That was the word used, honest. To me, implies that a lot of people believe that other people are not being honest. We personally don't believe other people weren't being honest, but there is certainly a sort of consensus out there that some people were not being honest with this game. And by the feedback that we've gotten in the comments for our review of The Last of Us, I think we're seeing that a lot of people agree with that statement. Another thing I want to mention is that we did not make a review that was meant to appease anyone. I did not want to appease people who said the game was bad, nor did I want to appease people that said the game was good. If you look at where our review falls and you just take Metacritic as an example, there are, 20-some thousand positive reviews and 30-some or 40-some thousand negative reviews and 2,000 some middle-of-the-road reviews. We fall into the 2,000, so I could have easily made a review for views that was insanely positive or insanely negative if I really wanted to get a lot of reviews, and that's not what we did. We are in the vast minority when it comes to what we think about the game, so there's that. Speaking specifically about gaming journalism and the industry itself and the gaming reviews surrounding The Last of Us 2 and just in general, it's become increasingly more and more challenging to do an honest review because one of the issues that you face as a reviewer when you gain early access to a game in order to do a review is that you feel pressure to give a good review because if you don't, then maybe the next game they publish, you will not be included on that list. Obviously, nobody is telling you that. Nobody is paying you money for your review. For anyone who thinks you get paid to do a review, that's simply not true. But there is sort of an implied pressure there because if you give a game a 6 or a 5 or whatever, something below an 8 or a 7.5, wherever the, acceptable score is for a good game. If you give it anything below that, you could potentially be blacklisted. And again, nobody's saying that you're going to be blacklisted, but you just never know because people could just be like, they could just not reply to your emails and you don't know because, gaming developers and publishers, they want their games to succeed. So when they're marketing them, and again, these decisions are probably made by the marketing team, not the actual developers themselves, are going to try and market the game in the best way possible. I think this is one of the reasons the game was, handled the way it was to market it the best way possible. And that's not on the critics and reviewers themselves, but they do feel incredible pressure. I have a lot of respect for people like ACG and SkillUp who did coverage of this game. ACG hasn't published his review specifically, but he did a video on the context of reviews. And one thing that I really appreciate is this guy buys the game every time. That's something that no reviewer does. Nobody does it because why? Why would you do it? But he makes a really good point, which is that if his money is invested in the game, then it prompts him to do a more honest review, and it's hard to argue that point. So respect there. And the other thing is he keeps his videos apolitical, which is our policy, and I really appreciate that because frankly, I'm not trying to tell you what your politics should be. I'm trying to tell you whether the game is good or not when I do a review from my opinion. Again, it's just one opinion, but you don't need to lecture on politics. You can get that somewhere else. And what I really like about SkillUp is here's a guy who was in the inner circle who had access to this game months in advance, who published a review that was negative, and he had to know he was going to be one of the few or the only ones that did. I mean, again, as I mentioned, the pressure around these games, particularly the very, very hyped games like Death Stranding and The Last of Us Part 2, is immense. Even Final Fantasy VII is immense. So you're seeing that pressure, I think, come through on the critics, and I don't necessarily blame them for that because that pressure is being put on them by the developer and the way they handle things. Here at Fextralife, we usually cover a certain section of games. If anyone who's subscribed to our channel will know, it's usually role-playing games or action role-playing games or classic role-playing games. But occasionally we stray into the games that sort of transcend gaming, like Death Stranding or Last of Us 2, God of War, things like this, where our community just wants to know what we think about it because there's so much discussion. And frankly, these are the hardest things to do because most of the games we're involved with, like Neo 2 or Final Fantasy 7, or even games like that we've been working with the developers on helping to promote, like Mortal Shell, we have some idea whether these games are going to be good or not long before we ever get to play them or long before the reviews are ever out. So it's not hard to do a review. It's not hard to do a review for a game you know is going to be good, and then you get there and it's good. It's hard to do a review for a game that you know is going to be good, and then it's not as good as you hoped, or it's just bad. That is very hard to do. And it's one of the reasons that we cover games that we love, games that we believe in, games we think are going to be good games, because we don't like being in that position. No one likes being in that position, and we try and avoid that position. But this time, we couldn't avoid it. There was no getting out of it. I mean, the game just was what it was, so we gave our honest take on it. Death Stranding is another game that people asked me for my opinion for, and the game, let's face it, as a game, not very good. The experience of the game was amazing, and honestly, if you sat down and watched the story of that game as a movie, you probably would have rated it higher than if you had to play, because the gameplay was arguably, probably by most people, the weakest aspect of that game, and I agree there wholeheartedly. But the thing about Death Stranding is when you got to the end of the Death Stranding, the payoff was worth it, I think. Or at least it was better than The Last of Us 2, if you want to make that argument. So why then do we do reviews? Why does Fextralife do reviews? If it's challenging, if it's difficult, if there's very little upside in a lot of cases. Obviously, by publishing the review we did about Last of Us, I imagine there's going to be a few people in Naughty Dog and Sony not happy with us. The reason we do it is because we're trying to give our community perspective on a game that they are interested in. We are trying to view the game through their lens and try and give a broader point of view of players in our community, whether they'll enjoy a game or not. Not just our opinion, not just my opinion or Fex's opinion or someone else, Fextralife's opinion, but we're trying to look at it from our community's perspective, whether they'll enjoy the game or not. Now, a lot of people watch reviews because for various reasons, they have very little time and they need to figure out what to spend their time on, or they have very little money and they need to decide how to spend it before they buy something. Or maybe they're just watching to validate their point of view, or maybe they're watching to learn something about the game. There are a lot of reasons people watch reviews these days. Maybe it's just for entertainment. So there is that as well. And we really feel like we'd be doing a disservice if we didn't keep that as part of our, broad spectrum of content that we deliver. Because I feel like more and more people are wanting to know what we think, and we obviously don't want to not give that to them. So you guys can look forward to more honest reviews from us. Obviously, I don't think we'll have to put honest in the title, but you never know. More and more of these games that are hyped, you might start seeing that more in the review from us. And, I hope that's refreshing for you guys. But please know, we're always doing our best to give our honest take despite these pressures. And we're never going to mislead you in order to buy something that you shouldn't, or to not buy something that you should because of any sort of agenda or anything like that. We're just going to break it down as we have always done with our rating system. And here's the thing. I mean, if you don't like a game because the gameplay's bad, and you just want to look at the gameplay section to get an idea from our review how good the gameplay is, look at that one section. Take that and go, hey, this game has good gameplay. I don't care about story. I'm going to get this game. I've had plenty of people say to me, I'm going to get this game. You convinced me to buy the game, and that's fine. I have no problem with people playing The Last of Us 2. The main thing is, if we want to make sure you guys get something out of the review, whether you disagree or agree or not, and we're always going to present it in the most professional manner possible.